Hello everybody, my name is Nils. I'm from the German office. I'm a health share solutions architect, and tonight I will present you about this very clumsy technical topic, dynamic consent-based access control and relationship management. Thanks for being interested. I hope you all enjoyed some fancy and cool sessions today, and over the next couple of minutes I will give you a brief overview why this solution we developed over a project scope matters. I will give you insights on the concept and the architecture. I will demo it to you, and after that I will just bring you some benefits and implementations insight and talk about a bit about our takeaways from this. So, why does this matter? Currently, we have lots of troubles with managing consent and access control. Consent on the one hand, so why are we allowed to accessing data? And access control on the other hand, protecting the data from being unauthorized accessed. So, as you see here, there are many different kind of troubles in there. We have these paper forms, we have manual administration processes, we have lots of possible or chooses lots of different ideas of accessing data, and in only a few parts are currently in an electronic way. So we have these manual processes. To just make the scope a bit clearer what we are talking about over the next few minutes, we have this patient and I'm visiting my doctor, and we are gathering some data of mine, some laboratory results, some radiology reports, and this data gets stored in a unified care record for further usage, like when I go to a different doctor or see a clinician in a healthcare provider network or something like this. And because of lots of regulations and because we are dealing with the most valuable data of patients, this data has to be protected, and in the best case, nobody who shouldn't be able should access this data. So, and now we have this kind of a problem. We have very often lots of possible options who want to access the data. And we have currently no way to know which one of this group of clinicians wants to access my data when I go there, for example, for an appointment or for a referral. So that is the starting point of the problem we tried to solve here. So, what did we come up with? In the first couple of weeks, we made us ideas about how could we solve this. We came up with an idea about using a so-called token mechanism that transports the patient consent. So I, as a patient, can create something that will allow clinicians to access my data. And then I can take this something and bring it to the clinician when he's seeing me, like directly in the moment of care. And then the clinician can use this something, let's call it a token, to get access to my clinical data. So, and what we have here is, at this point, we are talking about providing consent. So I allow this doctor for my treatment to see or access my data. And there we have access control in here, like the doctor is able to access my data. These are two different concepts, so just to make this clear. So, after this idea, we came up with a little architecture. First, we needed something for this consent or this token to be managed. So we came up with a custom token backend that we implemented for issuing, redeeming, and controlling the tokens. These tokens came up with, we put in there some metadata for access duration, then we can store the redeemer identity, we can store timestamp in there. And these tokens then would be used to create clinical relationships. And based on this, we enforce access control through default blocking policies. So all data is protected by default, and only data that has, or for data for patients that have special relationships to clinicians can be accessed by these clinicians. So this was the first part. Then we brought in a way to present this to the patient, and for this we used personal community custom applications. So we extended our own personal community with so-called Angular MFEs and integrated these into our personal community. With this, patients can create, track, and revoke these tokens. They have a nice UI that is integrated in an existing solution. We have access control for the patient in this solution. And also, after using these tokens, they are listed in here. And on the other end, we are now talking about the consent part. We have the way of also removing this consent. So after I gave or granted access for some doctors, maybe my part of or my treatment is over, my care plan is over, whatever, or I just want to know whoever has access to my medical data, I can use another part of the personal community to do this. And for this, we use the consent management part. And in that, we just listed and show all of the clinical relationship I as a patient have. So I can edit this in real time to modify the access. You will see this in a moment in a demonstration. And on the other side, on the professional side, we created a very small interface for the professionals to redeem these tokens. We just integrated this in the navigation application, so directly before you can go get access through the clinical viewer, you can just use this token, redeem it, and then you get access. And this is then reflected in the patient relationships in this case. So we had the starting point where we have the data stored centrally and a unified care record who brings us a consent engine and these relationships. And now we want to grant access to this clinician. And we can do this with creating a token in the personal community and use this token to hand it over through our chosen clinician, who then can redeem it and get access to the clinical data. And I would like to show you this in a short demonstration right now. So, first of all, just to show you that this data is rightly protected, I'm logging into the system as my doctor, called Semforel, some of you might know, and go to the clinical viewer and just try to search for my patient. And who's familiar with this interface sees there's no data shown, but there might be some data held back through consent policies. So now I'm switching to our personal community and log in as my patient, John Smith. And as you see, this is the default personal community, and we just extended it with a custom application for managing tokens. You see here, while setting up this demo, I already tried it, but I just now will create a new token. As I mentioned before, we can put in some metadata here. There's a period of validity, and I will just create this token, and it shows up in my list. As you see, it's not used, and there's no other information in this. I copy it for convenience, and now I go back to my doctor who can then can hand this over. So in the process, the doctor can now, we are sitting in front of this, in front of each other, and I hand over my token, and I can redeem this token through the clinic or through the interface in the navigation application. And after this, I now can just switch into the record of this patient and see all the data that was just given to me. And just for the technical background, just so that you can see it, I will switch to the registry of HealthShare, and we can have a short look at the relationship registry. So I'm looking here for, or look up my patient here, and you see that there we created the new relationship based on today's date with the validity of 2 weeks. And this is what me as a doctor now grants access to all the medical data of the patient. So after the care is taken and the process is over, we can switch back to our patient, who's then going again back into the personal community And now for his, if I would now want to see whoever has access to my data, I can go in here and have a look at my account settings. And this is all default interface now of the personal community. So that's nothing that got extended, nothing no own UI, nothing. And I can just see here in the consent management a list of my relationships. And for easy modification, we can just edit this and can now say, remove this relationship we have with Sam Farrell by revoking it and updating it. So after all now, I can go back to my doctor's interface, and I will show you in a second. I will now again search for this patient, and we will see the old result that there might be clinical data, but it's no longer showing because I just revoked the consent, and with that the relationship, and this access is immediately revoked. So yes, so much for the demo. Yeah, so actually this is the opposite of the idea we had, because we were asked to provide a solution to authorize a provider who's not known to the patient before the actual care. So like I get a referral, go to this orthopedic center and show your data to the doctor, and you don't know which doctor is there. And even if, for example, we had this idea of doing exactly this with something like a provider directory, if we are thinking about the German, as this is an example from Germany, we have like 100 Dr. Müller. So the idea of the project was that the patient is not capable of selecting the correct caretaker or care provider beforehand. So this was the solution for that. Of course, you could do this in a way by selecting the care provider, but this is just a different approach. Of course, you. Yeah. Of course, as I said, what we used here is the capability of personal community to get extended by custom applications. In Angular, it's Angular MFEs. And of course, you could build an MFE that has a list of all your doctors and maybe sorted by department, and then you can just select the doctor in the department. But then, of course, you have to know which doctor you want to give the access to. This was just the other way around. In the moment of care, you provide this token, the doctor enters it, and because he's logged into the system knows who to grant access to. Just different way of approaching this. Okay? Okay. For what were the benefits, and as we already got a question about it, some implementation insights. So the two main parts we needed to provide were patient empowerment and security. So we needed, as explained, a self-service functionality. We did this via the personal community. We had to go around this manual process of having administrative colleagues, nurses, whoever deal with this. We don't want it to have a paper-based process because they are never immediately. They are always like, I go to the hospital, I sign some papers, and normally that consent gets worked up like in the evening or so, or maybe even in the next day or next week. So, but normally you want to have your data protected all the time and have then access in the moment you visit your care provider. And this is by granting and revoking access in the seconds or immediately. The other thing is, this is a highly risk topic, and we need lots of security for this. So we needed time-limited tokens, so that if I lose my token, no one can find it and use it or try on it. We wanted to use as much as possible built-in functionalities for security kind of topics, and so we could use the default deny and relationship rules by the consent engine. Everything here, what is done is, because it's based on HealthShare standard functionality, is fully logged and auditable, and we can also time limit the relationships as we have seen. And then there's some more. We have this, for example, flexibility, where we have this real-world scenario where you don't know this is like my example, like where you don't know who is your caretaker when you book your appointment, only if the moment you enter the examination room. We have transparency. You can see whoever redeemed your token. You can see when it got redeemed, whatever. And this is also needed for regulatory standards. We have the GDPR and with all the patient rights that you as a provider have to provide all the information, whoever is accessing your data or was able to accessing your data. So this is building on this. And as mentioned before, we used the consent via relationship, so we could integrate all of this seamlessly in the personal community and in the same look and feel. And you can just edit and revoke it immediately. Some closings and takeaways from this. This was the first implementation of patient-controlled consent management in our region. We have never seen this before in that way. It was requested by a project. We wanted to leverage as much built-in functionalities, so don't do anything what has already been done. Especially, we don't want to deal with security. So we used the consent engine of Unified Care Record, the relationship API, and all of that. And of course, we identified some areas for improvement, and this is also the direction. So we thought about extending the payload of tokens. For example, now we just gave access to everything, but you could also add medical data categories in there. For example, keep out psychological reports and only give access to laboratory results. And this just as an example. So we can deal with more fine-grained access control. The next is that we could expand the grant and revoke actions, because now it's just giving access and not giving access. But you could think about if the consent gets revoked, maybe you have to follow the GDPR and mask some data, or at least, or even delete it. And yeah, the third part is enhance the UI and user experience. And as you said, how can you give it to the care provider? Of course, for this example, we dealt with only a 6-digit alphanumeric code. That's quite easy, but also not very secure. But so you can think about extending the token, making it into a QR code, add an additional factor to it, so make it just more secure. So there's lots of ideas and improvement for this. We could also switch the type of consent or access control we use here. Now we use relationship-based access control. We can also do this for facilities as a whole, of course, or what I said before in different kinds of medical data that can be accessed. So we could make this list longer, but these are the most popular, and we'll also talk to you about in the afterwards of the project. So thank you very much. So much from me. If you have any question, please go ahead. We have, I think, 46 seconds left. And otherwise, I will be outside, and you can catch up with me over there. Thank you very much.